Hey, what's up? Chris O'Cook here, and welcome to Hit Song Tricks, the video series that gives you, the amateur songwriter, quick and simple examples of little tricks you can use to make your rock and pop songwriting more interesting, more memorable, stand out more from what other people have heard. Today's example of a hit song trick is what I like to call the key fake out. Now, that's not an official musical term. It's just what I like to call it when a song, well, fakes you out about what key it's in. In other words, based on the first few chords in the progression, when your brain compares that with all the music you've heard before, you start off thinking that the song is in one key, and then when you get a few chords deep in the progression, there's one or two chords that make your brain go, ooh, I was wrong. I thought it was in one key. Turns out it's actually in a different key. Now, when a song can do that to you, can fake out your brain like that, it makes your brain sit up and take notice. This song is interesting. It hooked me. It does something I haven't heard a million times before. It didn't do what I expected it to do. I thought it was in one key. Turns out to be in a different one. Now, before anybody objects that the vast majority of people do not think about what key a song is in when they hear it, this is indeed true, but I do not mean to imply that this is a conscious process. Of course, most people don't actually think about what key a song is in when they hear it, but that doesn't matter, right? Because even if we're talking about somebody who has no musical training, no music theory, no anything like that, knows nothing about music, they've still heard thousands and thousands of songs. So whether they know it or not, every time they hear one, their brain is taking in that data and comparing it lightning fast to all of the thousands and thousands of songs they've heard before in their life, and is either telling them, you know, this sounds just like every other song, or this song somehow sounds different from every other song. So even in the case of somebody who knows nothing about music, which of course is most people, the key fake out will still work. They're not going to know why this song is making them go, ooh, this song's cool, but you know, it doesn't matter that they don't know why, it's still happening to them. Okay, so probably the most famous and most hallowed example of a song that fakes out the listener again and again and again about what key it's actually in is God Only Knows by the Beach Boys. Classic song from 1966. Now, I'm not going to use that as my example because, first of all, if I did, this video would be like 2 hours long. We're talking about Brian Wilson's masterpiece, so obviously there is a long and complicated explanation of why a genius work by a mega genius like Brian Wilson does whatever it is that it does. The second reason is that, well, frankly, I barely understand the explanation myself. That song is way too complicated to use as our example of a key fake out. I'm going to use instead a much simpler one, namely the 2011 more recent classic, Pumped Up Kicks by Foster the People. Now, unlike God Only Knows, which has like, I don't know, 25 different chords in it or something, Pumped Up Kicks is a 4-chord song. It's the same 4 chords the whole time. Those 4 chords are E minor, G, D, and A. Okay, now, sounds simple enough. Why is this chord progression actually brilliant? Because it fakes out the listener about what key it's in. Before I go any further, is it farther or further? Further. Before I go any further, let me clarify that this song is played with a capo on the first. Is it capo or capo? This song is played with a capo on the first fret, so if it sounded a little off when I was just playing from what the record actually sounds like, this should take care of that problem. The record, of course, actually sounds more like this. Okay, so a moment ago when I said E minor, G, D, and A. I was referring to the shapes of the chords, right? The finger shapes when we're playing open chords. Technically, you're playing it with a capo on the first fret, so everything is half a step up. So when I say E minor, G, D, and A, what the song is actually doing would be F minor, A flat, E flat, and B flat, or I suppose E sharp minor, G sharp, D sharp, and A sharp, depending on your point of view. You can see how ridiculous that gets rather quickly. So from here on out, we're going to forget about the whole half a step up capo on the first fret thing, and just talk about the chords by their shapes. So we're back to just simplifying it and saying that the song is E minor, G, D, and A. Now, the reason this is so simple, it's brilliant, is that based on the first three chords, your brain is 99% sure what the fourth chord is going to be, and it ain't an A. It's expecting a C. Why is that? Well, because, okay, your first two chords here, E minor and G, even based on that alone, you're already thinking, okay, this song is in the key of G major or E minor, depending on your point of view. If you know even a little bit about music theory, you probably already know that G major and E minor are the same scale. Like it would be, you'd be playing from G to G if it's G major and from E to E if it's E minor, but it would be the same notes, right? So just like the relative minor of C is A minor, the relative minor of G major is E minor. So whether you refer to the key as G major or E minor, matter of opinion. Since most rock and pop songwriting doesn't, I don't know, bother to mess around with saying that something is in a minor key unless you have a very good reason to. We'll do what most amateurs do and say, okay, well, if there's one sharp in the key signature, that means it's G major. I don't F with this E minor stuff. So, based on the E minor and the G that follows, right, that would be the 6 minor, right, the most common minor in the key of G, followed by G itself. After that, we get a D, which would be the 5th or dominant in the key of G. So those first three chords in this progression, E minor, G, and D, are the three, in one order or another, the three most common chords that are going to pop up in songs that are in the key of G major. Based on that, when you're 3/4 of the way through the 4-chord song progression here, based on all the other songs you've ever heard in your life, your brain would bet anything that the 4th chord is going to be, the most common 4th chord you would hear in a song where the other 3 chords, in whatever order, are E minor, G, and D, namely a C, the subdominant or 4th in the key of G major. So, in other words, your brain expects what you hear 90% of the time in rock and pop songwriting, the 1, 4, 5, and 6 chords in some kind of order. Now, even just dealing with the key of G here, to illustrate how common putting these 4 chords together in one order or another is, if we were to, and all within the key of G major, if we were to do a what they call a 50s progression, a 1-6-4-5 in the key of G, that would be Joey by Concrete Blonde. Joey. If you were to do the what's called the power ballad progression, the most common 4-chord progression for the last, well, I guess 50 years at this point, from the 70s forward, the 1-5-6-4 in G would be like a Any Way You Want It by Journey. Or if you were going to do what some people call the sensitive chord progression, which would be starting with the minor 6-4-1-5 in G. In other words, E minor followed by C, followed by G, followed by D. That would give you Zombie by the Cranberries. And if you less common, 6-1-5-4, which is what we think we're about to get here, right? Because we're starting with the 6 and the 1. We're starting with E minor and G, right? If it went G, E minor, C, and D, or 1-6-4-5, that would be our Joey by Concrete Blonde pattern. If we did our power ballad, G, D, E minor, C, that would, or 1-5-6-4, that would be our Any Way You Want It by Journey progression, or Good by Better Than Ezra, same thing, same key. The sensitive chord progression of 6-4-1-5 in G, in other words, E minor, C, G, D, would give us Zombie by the Cranberries. Also, Other Side by Red Hot Chili Peppers. What we think we're getting when we're 75% of the way into the chord progression in Pumped Up Kicks, it sounds like we're about to get 6, 1, 5, 4, which you don't hear too often. The only example I can think of, at least in the key of G, is the verses to Polly by Nirvana. That is only the verses. In the chorus, he brings in the flatted third. He brings in a B flat, and then the chorus goes D, C, G, B flat, which would be 5-4-1 flatted third. So for the first 75% of the 4-chord progression in Pumped Up Kicks, we think we're about to get the poly progression, right? We think we're about to get 6-1-5-4. But instead of a C, instead of the C major that our music memory would bet everything it has in the bank that it's about to hear, we instead get an A major. And that's the part where your brain goes, ooh, this song's different, And that song was a big hit, that was everywhere. I just dropped my pick on the floor. Good thing I put multiple picks on the table. That song was everywhere a little under 10 years ago. I mean, to the point that it basically became like the unofficial theme song of the whole second decade of the 21st century. Now, in terms of why that song was such a hit, well, of course, there are many reasons. It was really well produced. Those guys do a cool harmony thing with the chorus. And of course, as the internet has extensively observed, you've got the whole ironic contrast thing going on between the peppy sound of the song and these lyrics that turn out to be like dark and disturbing when you actually pay attention to what the guy's saying. These all help to make it a hit, but one thing I haven't heard people talk about as much as those other factors is the fact that it fakes you out in terms of key. So your you're ready to regard it as, okay, yet another song that uses the four most common chords in the key of G major, right? The 1, the 4, the 5, and the 6 in some kind of order, just like a million songs. And then when you get that A, you're like, whoa, okay, that doesn't belong in the key of G. Now, if it did, if we were going to say we still are in the key of G, then that would mean that they're making the 2 major, right? The 2 chord in the key of G major would be an A minor. Now, are there songs that just, go right ahead and make the 2 major? Yeah. It happens a lot in jazz. So now your brain is confused. You're like, wait, do I regard this as a song that's still in the key of G, but just there's a major 2 in it, like these guys think it's jazz or something? Or was I wrong about the fact that it was in the key of G? Your brain starts recalibrating it. Okay, well, our 3 major chords are now G, D, and A. Well, the key where those are the 3 major chords isn't G major, it's D major, right? Where D would be the 1 and G the 4 and A the 5. So now your ear doesn't know what to call it, right? Is this song a 6-1-5 major 2 in G, or is it a 2-4-1-5 in D, right? That initial chord, that E minor, in the key of D would be the 2. Now, that's not unheard of. There are songs that use the 3 major chords and just replace the 6 with the 2. As the 1 minor chord. As you know, if you've watched my other rock and pop songwriting videos, 90-something% of the time when there's only 1 minor chord in a song, it's probably the 6. But every once in a while, there are songs that use the 3 majors and 1 minor, and the minor is the 2 instead of the 6. Probably the most prominent example to you would be Just Like Heaven by The Cure. 2, 4 in A. So that's A, E, B minor, D. Pumped Up Kicks might be doing this variation on that where you're leading with the 2, which you don't hear often. So now what your ear decides it's actually dealing with is not a sorry, not a 6-1-5 2 major in G at all, but rather a 2-4-1-5 in D major. That's my 2 cents about why, or at least a big part of why, that Pumped Up Kick song was so inescapable 8 or 9 years ago. There's only 4 chords in it. It's a simple 4-chord progression, like so many great songs. But for the first 75% of that progression, your the music part of your brain expects the song to turn out to be in the key of G major, but then, oops, gotcha, the 4th and final chord of the progression pulls the rug out from under your ear. I'm pretty sure that was a mixed metaphor, but whatever. And it turns out that the song was actually in D major all along. So if you can manage to do this, right, write a song where for the first few chords of the progression, people expect it to be in one key, and then the last chord of the progression is like, gotcha, it's actually in this other key. There's no guarantees in life, but there's a pretty decent chance you'll end up with a hit song in your hands. So go ahead and try it. Happy writing.